Hi guys. So I previously tested the older SUPERGLIDE skates very thoroughly, so I asked Pulsar to send me their new version to try. I've been now testing them out a couple of weeks every now and then, and I have some interesting findings I wanted to share with you guys. Let's start with the initial testing. To find the base values of the friction properties, I tested the friction on Viper V2 stock skates, the old SUPERGLIDEs and then the new ones. To find the static friction coefficient, I placed the mouse on a table with additional weight and lifted one side up while measuring the angle the mouse started to move. This test was also done without the weight to see how much of a difference it would make. The kinetic friction test is then done with fixing the same table to 12 degrees angle and measuring the time it takes the mouse to move 30 centimeters. This test was also done with and without the additional weight. And all was fine and dandy with testing the stock skates and the old SUPERGLIDEs. Nothing unusual, around 8.5 degrees on the stock skates and 2.8 degrees on the old SUPERGLIDEs on static and approximately 1.4 seconds on kinetic friction test on both. But then came the time to test the new SUPERGLIDEs. I installed the SUPERGLIDEs to the Viper V2 and did some test swipes on the mousepad and it felt pretty good. But when I did the first tests, I found that the static friction was actually extremely high and measured around 15 degrees. And can you guess what happens when I measure kinetic friction on an angle that's smaller than that? Well, this. It doesn't move. The reason for this really high static friction is the lack of the coating on the skates, but my guess is that also the matte finish on the skates interfere with some pads quite horribly. It seems that my choice of using the Hayate Otsu on this test was not the perfect fit for the skates. And that was a bummer. I then tested a lot of different pads to see what pad suits these feet best, and my conclusion is that the smoother the pad, the better the experience is. For example, the Pulsar ES2, Little Game Gear Saturn and the Waxy PA feel really good on these skates. The static friction is still quite high compared to PTFE skates on these smoother pads as well, but when you get the mouse moving, the experience is somewhat fast. It's not uncontrollable fast, but quicker than the PTFE skates. But after some usage, I wanted to do this test again with you guys, but this time with a bigger angle to get a solid kinetic friction value. First, let me introduce the test subjects. First mouse is for a baseline value of Corpad skates, and this is the HTS Plus from G-Wolves. Second mouse I'm gonna test is the PMM Starlight S with the older Viper V2 SUPERGLIDE skates, and lastly the new version of the skates are installed on my Viper V2 Pro. All these mice are now the same weight, around 59 grams, thanks to my good friend Blue Tack. Please sponsor me. So let's do the static friction tests first. The HTS Plus with Corpad starts to move at around 9.2 degrees. The PMM Starlight S with the older SUPERGLIDE starts to move at around 3.3 degrees. The movement is very hard to see from the footage because the angle is so small, but trust me, it moved. Then with the newer SUPERGLIDEs you can clearly see that even on a smoother pad, the Waxy PA, the mouse starts to move at around 30.4 or 13.5 degrees. This time with the larger angle, the kinetic friction tests show that it takes around 2.4 seconds for the Corpad's mouse to travel 30 centimeters. The older SUPERGLIDEs are quite a bit faster and it takes just 1.13 seconds for the mouse to travel the same distance. The newer SUPERGLIDEs are even faster and they travel the same distance in just 0.53 seconds. So in conclusion, the newer SUPERGLIDEs are a combination of high static friction with lower kinetic friction, which is kinda the opposite of the older SUPERGLIDEs. Gaming wise, the new version of the SUPERGLIDEs felt pretty good, but honestly the high static and low kinetic friction is not my favorite combination for games that require a lot of micro corrections. Holding angles and flicking accurately to targets should not be an issue with these, but for games that have a lot of movement and require you to adjust quickly, I feel like PTFE skates are a better pick. The older SUPERGLIDEs had some issues with durability because the coating would wear off, so the lack of coating in these should mitigate those problems. I won't do a full-on stress test for a month this time, so I can't state these as facts however. Also, on the older SUPERGLIDEs the experience varied a lot with humidity and dirtiness of the pad. These are not issues at all on these newer ones. If I wipe my pad with a wet towel from the center, the feeling is very muddy when I go over it with the older ones. The newer ones don't seem to be affected at all of this extra moisture on the pad. So if you don't mind the higher static friction and want skates that will probably last you a really long time and maybe live in a very humid environment and have problems related to that, I can see these skates to suit your needs well. For me, I still prefer some good BTFE skates. It's still nice to see Pulsar to continue innovating and improving their products based on user feedback. So thanks to Pulsar for sending these out to test, and if you found this video interesting, maybe press like and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this one. Thanks for watching and goodbye.